This is Twit.
In a surprise decision, the European Union Court of Justice ruled that Google must remove or edit information or links from its search engine upon request. Greg Sterling is the founder of Sterling Market Intelligence, a senior analyst for Internet to Go, and a contributing editor for Search Engine Land, where he wrote a brilliant piece on this story. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I don't know if I would say it was brilliant, but thank you for the compliment.
I liked it quite a bit. I read about 20 of the pieces today, and yours was particularly insightful, and I enjoyed it very much and got a lot out of it. So what does this ruling mean for Google exactly?
Well, what it seems to mean is that if the Data Protection Authority of a particular country in Europe requests specific information about an individual to be removed from its search results, that information has to be removed.
How does this actually practically play out, though? Because I just got off the phone with the Google public policy folks, and they said that this is technically going to be a mess for them to try and implement. Is that true? Will there have to be kind of an internet court for private citizens who want information taken down to go to, or would they go straight to Google? Just how does this play out practically?
I think these are the key questions, because while the idea behind the decision that individuals should have some ability to control the information about them online is a good idea, the practical implementation is really problematic for some of the reasons that you just alluded to. The court, in its materials sent out today, didn't really establish a lot of guidelines. What I gather the procedure is going to be is that the individuals go to Google or go to a search engine and say, I want this or that piece of information removed. Google will then say yes or no. If it says no, then the individual will have recourse to the Data Protection Authority, who seemingly can compel Google to make the change. And I think there's just an enormous amount of ambiguity and many gray areas here that are going to be a mess, as you suggest.
Now, how does this work across borders? Obviously, this is a European Union ruling, so I imagine that if a European person, citizen of the European Union, has a complaint, goes through the process, and can get Google to remove a link or change some information. What about the U.S. version of Google? If it's removed in Europe, do Americans and people in Asia and Africa and Latin America still see the information, but Europeans don't? And likewise, if an American or a person in China or somewhere outside of Europe posts something about a European person, can Google be compelled to remove that information?
That makes my head hurt, Mike. I don't know if I can answer those questions. I think that some of that stuff remains to be seen. My guess is that in jurisdictions outside of Europe, this would have no impact. But as you say, there are. I don't think a European would have any ability to ask Google in the U.S. to remove data from its U.S. search results. I think that would pertain to Europe. But I think that there are many complicated aspects to this that would that remain to be worked out. But my sort of short answer, without being a European law expert, is that it's really just going to be confined to the borders of Europe and search results that are displayed there.
And Greg, we actually have a question from a viewer that touches on some really important issues, which is, his question is, if you want something taken down, shouldn't you go to where it's posted, the publisher, and not Google? And that sort of is the heart of the argument by these search engines, which is that they are intermediaries and they're not publishers. The court seems to be saying that they need to take their role far more seriously than just as a middleman. Should people just be going to publishers instead of the intermediary?
Well, this aspect of the case makes no sense. In the particular instance that gave rise to this case, a newspaper site published some information that the individual wanted removed. The newspaper refused to do so, and the European court said the newspaper doesn't have to remove the information. So applying a rule to Google or to other search engines without similarly applying the rule to the publisher doesn't make any sense, because the information will still live online at the original publisher site. And this doesn't seem to have any application to them. So I don't really understand why if the rule exists, it doesn't pertain to the publishers. But in the United States, that would be precisely the way that it would work. For example, if there was defamation or some claim like that, you would have to go to the originating publisher and resolve it with them, either informally or legally, and Google would be exempt from liability under U.S. First Amendment law and other case law. But and rules that pertain to internet specific publishing. but it's just a very problematic aspect of the decision. That's what you're supposed to do in theory, but this decision seems to make it possible for the individual to go directly to a search engine without going to the publisher first. That should be a preliminary step in any procedure.
Now, you wrote that this
Interesting.
de facto right to be forgotten ruling is similar to California's eraser law. How are they similar?
I don't know everything about the eraser law, but my understanding of that law is that minors, those under 18, can gain the removal of embarrassing, incriminating, humiliating information that may have been published prior to their becoming an adult. So if somebody had some embarrassing pictures on Facebook or got involved in some incident that would compromise their ability to get a job, so on and so forth, that material can be removed. I don't know the precise procedure, but I think that makes a certain amount of sense because the law treats minors as not having the same capacity to understand and consent to certain kinds of things that adults can. The distinction here, and that law may be challenged on First Amendment grounds. We'll see. But and that's in California, as you mentioned. The distinction here is that this pertains to everybody and will be primarily used by adults trying to control their reputation. My concern is really that you have, business executives, sort of low-level political figures, and others, professionals who may be trying to manage public perceptions, have some shady thing in their past, negligence, corruption, some element that the public should be made aware of or entitled to know about, and they'll be trying to conceal that. That's a big gray area where I think that there's a major problem potentially.
Yeah, and in egalitarian-minded European countries like Germany and others, this seems to create a kind of problem where wealthy people, powerful people will have the resources to go through this lengthy and probably expensive process, to throw lawyers at this whole thing, to remove not only the list of transgressions that are legitimate, which you trotted out, but also, just criticism, minor things, and then argue, push the envelope of exactly what's, violating people's fundamental rights is the language in the ruling. Is this going to create a sort of a class distinction between who gets privacy protection or who gets to essentially censor information about themselves, where the poorer people who don't have the time and money, anything can be said about them, and wealthy people are protected?
I think that's a concern. I think the Europeans would probably argue this is going to be equally applicable and it's not going to be burdensome for non-wealthy individuals to pursue this. But I think you're right. As a practical matter, those with means and the ability to hire others to pursue this will be ones that succeed. And they're the ones in a position probably or they're the ones that are going to be concerned about managing their reputation more than, a Silvio Berlusconi, for example, although a public figure, is going to be more likely to be concerned about his reputation than some resident of some obscure rural village who may have had some run-in with the law or a fellow, community member or something like that. So I do think that that's a concern. We'll see.
All right. Well, Greg Sterling, I want to thank you and your daughters, Parakeets, for joining us today on Tech News Today.
Yes, the parakeet was very happy to be participating in the program, and I was too. Thank you.
Parakeet's ready to
Thanks, Greg.
flip the bird to the European Union over this ruling, I guess. Okay, well, Greg Sterling can be reached at searchengineland.com, and elsewhere you can find more of his information on his Twitter account at @gsterling.
You can just Google me and find me. I haven't removed any of the links yet.
Okay, well, there's a long, lengthy process for that, so that comes later. Thanks again, Greg.
All right, take care.